continues to grow too.
Well, obviously, like, people respect people with zeros at the end of their checks. Like, let's just be honest. Like, there's respect element of things when you walk into a room if you have zeros behind your check. And so I feel like in order for the WNBA to be reputable and to be respected, you have to have zeros behind your check. And with that being said, a number of zeros behind your check. And that has crossed WNBA off the list for a number of years just because of that.
That right there is one of the most revealing statements about WNBA salaries you'll ever hear. Candace Parker, 3-time champion, 2-time MVP, just said something that sounds reasonable on the surface, but falls apart the moment you examine it closely. And the problem is, this kind of thinking is exactly what's complicating CBA negotiations right now. Here's what she's arguing. Players need more zeros on their paychecks to earn rest. That if WNBA salaries looked more impressive on paper, suddenly, the league would be taken seriously. But there's a fundamental flaw in that logic, and it's one that keeps coming up in these discussions. Respect doesn't come from the number on your contract. It comes from what you do to earn that contract. Think about it this way. If you walked into your boss's office tomorrow and said, "I need a raise because if I made more money, people would respect me more, and then I could get better endorsement deals," how do you think that conversation would go? Your boss would probably ask what you've done to deserve that raise. What value have you added? What results have you delivered?
Been highlighted over the past 2 seasons that has to continue to get better in order for this league to be that premier league like Candace is talking about, and also to be well respected. So I don't think it's as black and white as oh, if all of a sudden these players are making millions of dollars, they're going to be respected. I don't wholeheartedly agree with that. And I also don't think that that's the greatest argument to be made as to why you deserve to be paid more. Now, she also brings up the social media comments and the narratives around the WNBA. I also don't think that any of those things, like the jokes around the WNBA, just go away all of a sudden if players are paid more. Anyway, let's continue.
Now watch this argument carefully, because this is where things get interesting. She's saying coaches are making over $1 million, while the best players on their teams make less. And on the surface, that sounds outrageous. The star player should make more than the coach, right? That's how it works in every other league. But here's the context she's leaving out. Those $1 million coaches didn't come from nowhere. Nate Tibbetts was an assistant coach for 3 different NBA teams before Las Vegas brought him in. Becky Hammon spent years learning under Greg Popovich, arguably the greatest coach in basketball history. These are NBA caliber coaches who took a chance on a league that, let's be honest, was still trying to prove itself. To get those coaches to leave the NBA ecosystem, WNBA teams had to pay premium rates. And here's the thing, it worked. Becky Hammon won a championship in her first season. The Aces became a dynasty. The investment paid off immediately. And with the new CBA proposal on the table, the top players would actually be making over $1 million too. So this talking point about coaches making more than players is about to become irrelevant. The real question is whether players are willing to accept the deal that gets them there.
I have never, and please correct me if I'm wrong,
I don't know.
the best player on the team is going to make more than the head coach.
Yes.
So with all of these owners that are saying, or the WNBA in general that's saying we can't play players that, then how are you finding this for coaches is what would be my first question in the CBA negotiations. But
all right, there's a couple things to break down here. Let's first talk about the salaries and her saying that the women just need to wait. So I actually looked up what the average salary was in 1975, which was the 30th season in the NBA. So as you guys know, the NBA is in its 80 something season. The WNBA will be going into their 30th season, seeing as if the 30th season happens and they figure out the CBA. So in 1975 in the NBA, the estimated average player salary was around $50,000. This figure would be roughly $270,000 in today's money when adjusted for inflation. So
This is the part that really needs unpacking, because Candace is making an argument about social media followers translating to value. She mentions Paige Bueckers having more followers than Jalen Suggs when they were both draft prospects. And sure, that's true. But here's what that actually proves. Absolutely nothing about basketball value. Angel Reese has more social media followers than Caitlin Clark. She's the most followed WNBA player right now. But when you look at actual viewership numbers and attendance figures, the Indiana Fever absolutely demolishes the Chicago Sky in every measurable category. The Fever averaged 1.2 million viewers per game last season. The Sky couldn't crack 500,000 for most of their games. Social media followers don't put people in seats. They don't make people tune in for 40 minutes of basketball. And they definitely don't make you a better player on the court. This is professional sports, not influencer marketing. Your value is determined by wins, championships, and how many people actually want to watch you play. The WNBA owners aren't sitting in boardrooms saying, well, she has 3 million Instagram followers, so let's pay her more. They're looking at revenue generated, tickets sold, and playoff appearances. That's how every professional sports league in the world operates.
It's impacting from top to bottom, and I'm just grateful for social media because I think numbers don't lie.
Transparency.
And there's transparency, and you see with NIL how much somebody is worth. Coming out of school.
I also don't love this argument because social media followers don't translate to viewership and attendance. Like, even if you look at Angel Reese is the most followed WNBA player. She has more social media followers than Caitlin Clark. But if you look at viewership and attendance for the Indiana Fever versus the Chicago Sky, the Indiana Fever wipes the floor with them in literally every category. And your social media followers also don't equate to your productivity on the court. Like, the WNBA owners, the coaches, the league is more concerned about how you play on the court, how much you can contribute, what kind of championships you can bring to the organization than they do about social media followers. So yes, I understand what she's saying. If they were making more, maybe they would be able to get more off-court endorsement deals, but that's also not a good argument because the owners don't care. Like, again, imagine going to your boss and being like, I need to get paid more because since I'm not getting paid so much here,
And this is the reality that nobody wants to talk about, honestly. For most of the WNBA's history, playing overseas was more lucrative than playing in the States. Candace is being completely transparent here. Russia paid better, treated players better, and provided a lifestyle that the WNBA couldn't match. Her summer job was the WNBA. Her actual career was in Russia. But here's the part that should terrify everyone who cares about this league. Diana Taurasi once skipped an entire WNBA season to play in Russia because they paid her $1 million specifically to not play in the WNBA. Think about that. The greatest player in league history at the time, in her prime, sat out a full season, and you know what changed in the WNBA? Nothing. Viewership didn't drop, attendance stayed flat, the league just kept going without her. That tells you everything about the leverage players actually have. When your biggest star can disappear for a year and nobody notices, that's not a strong negotiating position. And it reveals something uncomfortable about the WNBA's structure. It was never set up to be the Premier League. It was set up to be a summer option while players made their real money elsewhere. The season is 4 months long. You have to make the finals just to hit the 6-month mark. Compare that to the NBA's 8-month season. The WNBA schedule was designed around the assumption that players would be doing something else for the other 8 months of the year.
The average salary in the NBA during their 30th season. The new proposal from the WNBA has an average salary around $500,000 for this season. So that is significantly more than what NBA players were making during their 30th season. Now, if you guys also remember, the minimum salary from last season, or the maximum salary from last season, was around 220 something thousand. Like, that would be the minimum salary if the WNBA players agreed to this new salary deal, these new terms that the WNBA proposed, with the maximum salary being over $1 million. Now, Candace also talks about here, how are coaches making more than the players? Like, the best player on the team should be making more than the coach. And with all of this, it's very...
Let's talk about the salary comparison that actually matters, because this is where the numbers get really interesting. I looked up what NBA players were making in 1975, which was the NBA's 30th season. The WNBA is about to enter its 30th season, assuming they figure out this CBA situation. In 1975, the average NBA salary was around $50,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $270,000 in today's money. Now look at what the WNBA is proposing. An average salary around $500,000. That's almost double what NBA players were making at the same point in their league's history. The minimum salary under the new proposal would be $220,000. Last season's maximum salary was around that same number. So the floor is becoming what the ceiling used to be, and the maximum salary would exceed $1 million. Players would be making more in their 30th season than NBA players made in theirs, even after adjusting for inflation. Does that mean WNBA players are overpaid? No. Does it mean they should stop pushing for more? Also no. But it does mean the argument that they're being held back or forced to wait isn't supported by historical comparison. The WNBA is actually ahead of where the NBA was at this stage. The problem isn't the rate of salary growth. The problem is the league's fundamental structure, and that's a much harder conversation to have.
To compare the WNBA to any other major sports league, because it's just truly not the same. And I've talked about this in other videos. Like, the WNBA from the start, it wasn't set up like a professional sports league. I understand that they used the NBA to get the league going, but it almost felt like everything they did to get this league going was kind of an afterthought. So even when we talk about the coaches making more, the coaches that are currently making more than the players are coaches that came from the NBA. In order to get these NBA coaches, like Nate Tibbetts was assistant coach for 3 NBA teams. Becky Hammon was also an assistant coach under coach Greg Popovich, who is arguably one of the greatest NBA coaches of all time. To get these coaches to coach in the WNBA, you're going to have to pay them exponentially more. Now, these coaches are reported to be making over $1 million. But again, with this new proposal from the WNBA, the top players on each team will also be making that. So at this point in time, the players will be making as much as the coaches and hopefully more, but it's also just like an apples to oranges comparison. In the NBA, that is the premier league in the world. And the owners are probably thinking, if we can get these premier coaches from the NBA, from the #1, the leading basketball organization in the world, if we can get coaches from there, then we can bring titles to our franchises. And that's exactly what they did with Becky Hammon, and Nate Tibbetts, again, made it to the WNBA finals last year. So I feel like that's probably the thought process around these coaches. As much as I agree with Candace, as the players also deserve to be getting paid this much, it's a hard, like, black and white comparison to make. But let's continue.
I think there's got to be a tremendous amount of change, because it's not only impacting the on the court salary, it's public, so people understand what you're playing in the WNBA for. So these companies are then coming to you less than male counterparts, and women have more sometimes at times with more followers. And you look at Paige Becker's, what her followers in college were way more than Jalen Suggs that got drafted. And so it's just...
This is the most important point Candace makes in the entire interview, and it's the one that deserves the most attention. She's absolutely right that the WNBA needs tremendous change, but not just in salaries, in everything. The league needs to be longer. Right now, the season runs from May to September, maybe October if you make the finals. That's not a professional sports league. That's a summer tournament. If the WNBA wants to be taken seriously as the premier women's basketball league in the world, the season needs to run through November at minimum, ideally through December. And here's the controversial part. They need to start writing exclusivity into contract. No more running off to play in Turkey or Russia the moment the WNBA season ends. The top soccer leagues in the world don't let their players moonlight in other countries during the offseason. The NBA doesn't allow it. If you want to be the Premier League, you have to act like the Premier League. Yes, some players will go play in Saudi Arabia for absurd money, just like some soccer players do. But the best players stay in the best leagues, because that's where you build your legacy. That's where you compete for real championships that people remember. Nobody's putting their Turkish League championship in their Hall of Fame speech. The WNBA was never set up for long-term success. It was set up as an afterthought, a summer experiment to see if women's basketball could work. And 29 years later, it's still operating under that same framework. That's the real problem.
More money from Adidas, Nike, McDonald's, or whoever the brand sponsor is on social media. It's like, that's not a good argument. Like, the performance is the argument. So yes, social media numbers are great for these individual players, but when it comes down to talking about the CBA, like, sports is one of the only things still that is not affected by how much social media influence a player has. It is measured by how well you perform on the court, like how good of a basketball player you are, period. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to this next part.
You used to have, and you kind of just touched on it, the WNBA wasn't necessarily your high, you had to go make your money in the off season overseas.
Yep.
What was that like? I mean, that's basketball pretty much year round. The one thing that everyone wanted to be is in the W in the States and have a strong league. We're still trying to get that there. You had to really go make your money overseas.
Yeah, my summer job was the WNBA. I mean, I played the WNBA 100% because I loved the game and I wanted to play, and the ball was bouncing. I wanted to play in front of people that, you know,
spoke English.
Yeah, spoke English and all those things. Made my marketing endorsements, Adidas and Gatorade and, you know, that type of thing. But it was overseas where, like, I take care of my family, you know, and I mean, the Rolexes, the black diamonds as gifts from our, you know, our owners over there, Russian owner, chefs, drivers, beautiful apartments.
So here's what this all comes down to. Candace Parker is right that the WNBA needs to change. She's right that players deserve better. She's right that the league has been operating in a holding pattern for too long. But the arguments she's making for why players should be paid more are not the arguments that are going to win this negotiation. Saying we need more zeros so people respect us isn't a business case. Saying coaches make more than players ignores why those coaches were hired and what they've accomplished. Saying we have social media followers doesn't address why viewership and attendance don't match those numbers. The actual argument is this. The WNBA had record viewership last season. Multiple games exceeded 1 million viewers. Attendance was up across the board. The playoff ratings were the highest in league history. Caitlin Clark's debut season brought in casual fans who had never watched before, and many of them stayed. That's growth. That's measurable, quantifiable success. That's what you take to the negotiating table. The league is proposing an average salary of $500,000, with top players making over $1 million. That's a massive increase from where things were just 2 years ago. Is it enough? Maybe not. Should players push for more? Absolutely. But they need to push with the right arguments, backed by the right evidence. And they need to be realistic about what a lockout would do. If the WNBA doesn't play this season, it would devastate the momentum they've built. Casual fans who just discovered the league would disappear. Sponsors would pull back. Media coverage would evaporate. And when you're trying to establish yourself as a major league, you can't afford to go dark for a year. The NBA survived lockouts because it was already established. Fans came back because they had decades of loyalty built up. The WNBA doesn't have that luxury. One lost season could set the league back 5 years, maybe more. Here's what needs to happen. The players need to accept that this CBA negotiation isn't going to solve every problem. It's not going to make them as rich as NBA players overnight. It's not going to force casual fans to respect them. It's not going to eliminate the jokes on social media. What it will do is give them a significant raise, better working conditions, and a platform to continue building. Then, over the next few years, the league needs to fundamentally restructure. Longer season. Exclusivity clauses. Better scheduling that doesn't conflict with the Olympics or other major events. Improved officiating that doesn't become the story every playoff series. Media training for players so they stop creating unnecessary drama. A marketing strategy that highlights the basketball instead of manufactured rivalries. The WNBA has more potential right now than it's had at any point in its history. But potential doesn't pay the bills. Execution does. And execution requires everyone, players and owners, to be honest about where the league actually is versus where they want it to be. Candace Parker is one of the greatest players in WNBA history. Her legacy is secure, but the arguments she's making in this interview reveal a disconnect between perception and reality, between what sounds good in a podcast and what actually works in a boardroom. And if the players go into these CBA negotiations making these same arguments, they're going to be disappointed with the results. The leverage isn't in social media followers or the need for respect. The leverage is in the ratings, the attendance, the proof that this league is finally breaking through to mainstream audiences. That's the story they need to tell. That's the evidence they need to present. And that's the only way they're going to get the deal they deserve. So what do you think? Are the players asking for too much too soon, or is the league lowballing them after a record-breaking season? And more importantly, can the WNBA afford to lose a season right when it's finally gaining momentum? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about where this league actually goes from here. Hit that subscribe button because we're going to be covering every development in these negotiations as they happen. This is just the beginning.